All right, so I'm going to give a quick update of this year's Western Mappers projects, the various cave things we've done, and a little update of what's going to happen in the future. Next, please, Paul. All right, so this is a slide I show almost every year with some various changes. This is the basic concept of the Western Mappers. The idea is that we want to be able to map and have projects, keep it very simple, regular schedule, which we've kind of lost this year because there's no, actually I shouldn't say that, that's not true. Everyone's welcome, including beginners. The really membership rule is very simple. You show up. If you're not a member, it's because you haven't shown up. I'm looking at someone. Anyway, very high survey standards, front and back sites. Loops close, always very good. We've had some spectacular examples of that over the years. It's really worked really well. You get immediate results. We always get our survey data taken, entered the computer that weekend whenever we survey, if it's possible. And the most important thing is no politics. We focus on caving, and that's the main thing. You don't get into fights about stuff. That doesn't matter. You just have a good time and go caving. Next, Paul, please. So we did the crystal survey from 12 to 16. This is a book summary of everything here. Once again, all the loops closed. This is a spaghetti cave in many ways. Next, Paul. That's the cover of the monograph, which we have here to sell if people want to buy one. And of course, for those I was mentioning, those are the quartz crystals. Those are about 2 inches across. It's like being in a geode. So after crystal, I sat down with Tom Gilliland in his database of caves and tried to find another cave that needed surveying of some size in southern Arizona. Next, Paul. Oh, I'm sorry. And in doing that, I came up with one, Outlaw Cave. We did this last year. It's one cave. We did it in 1 day, 16 surveys plus a few others. It required some landowner relations. The owner, Ron Peters, lives in Texas, though he has a house right near Outlaw on that property that his family comes to for vacations and reunions. Brenda Haynes was a ranger here at Karchner giving a tour when this friendly guy suddenly says to her, "Do you know anything about wild caves?" And it was Ron, and he wanted to know if she knew anything. And he took her in the cave. They got friendly, and she suggested he contact me, and so we got in touch. We talked, we worked it out so that we could do a survey project. Next slide. That was the map. I got this framed. One thing that hadn't happened at last ARA is that I spent money to get it really framed. It's not quite that big in a frame, but it's about this high in a frame and about that wide to the floor. And I had it framed, and I made a meeting to come to their house in near Paradise on this property, and I presented it to the family and to Ron, and they were very excited about that. They basically told me that if we want to arrange trips now, we can always do that. But, you know, we don't want to bother them too often, but they're friendly about that. Summary of the survey. Basically, next, that's the map. The map was put together over a period of time. The map was actually the first thing finished. We wanted to make another monograph like the crystal monograph. This is I'm sorry, go back a second. I got confused. I thought I was talking about. So we started the Buckelew survey. This was the second cave I found on Tom's database. We surveyed it for about 2 years. It was much easier to survey. It's a much smaller cave than crystal, as you can see. It's not even a mile, but it involved vertical work to get into the cave. We did some ridge walking in the area and found a few potential caves which we dug on, but nothing has gone. There's still more ridge walking to do. I did a ridge walk with David Vodonik just 2 weeks ago and found a lot of potential there. There's no question this needs to be checked. So landowner relations. I spent a year of negotiation. Tom's database said that the landowner was a veterinarian who worked in Michigan, but he had allowed science projects there. The cave was closed. And so I wrote him a letter. I wrote him a second letter. I sent him the crystal monograph plus another one I had done. I sent him a third letter. He called me, we talked. He said, well, you should meet my sister Frances and her husband Peter Grill, because they really manage the cave. I live up here, I own it, but my sister and her husband manage it. They live on the ranch. And basically, Peter was I think reluctant to have strangers come on the property, so I tried several times to make arrangements to meet with them. Finally was able to meet. Me and my wife were actually out there. I was giving a talk at Rodeo during one of their annual events where they have speakers come. I was talking about the Crystal Project. So me and my wife sat with them for about 3 hours. My wife at the time owned a cave in West Virginia, which helped quite a bit. And we talked, and actually within 20 minutes of meeting Peter, he said, we've got a house on the property that's abandoned. You could use it as a field house. So relations were really good right away, and they were very happy. The cavers came, 17 people came and cleaned up that house. It had been abandoned for a while. It was in good shape, but it was really a mess. Some people here did a lot of work on the toilet so that it would work. Thank you, Nicole and Adam, if he's here, and Brian. But we got that fixed, and we then took the owners on the Sunday of that first work weekend to see the work. And all I can remember, they're ranching farmer folk, so they're quiet, soft-spoken. And so Lauren Weaver, the owner, he was there to meet us. He came from Michigan. He comes down periodically. And they come into the room, and the only word out of Lauren's mouth was, wow. And he said it much softer than I did, because I'm not a soft I'm a New Yorker. So they were very impressed, and they were very happy. And basically now the cavers can go to that cave. They have to work through me. I've tried to get a management plan. They weren't open to that yet, but I think as trust builds, we'll be okay with that. But we can make a trip if we want, and we can use that field house anytime the cavers wish, pretty much, because they liked how we kept it maintained for them. In fact, they're disappointed we're not there anymore, because people coming monthly helps keep a place running. Next slide, please. So this is the map at Buckelew. This is it's a monograph once again, so it's an atlas style, and this is the index showing you where the various sections are in the cave, and there's overlap. The first and second pages are at landscape mode, and that takes you down into the cave through levels, and then the 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all the bottom level. Next slide, please. And you can see it's a vertical cave, so there's a profiled section. The entrance takes you down through the grill pit. I named that after the grills. Weaver Canyon in the back after Lauren Weaver. And then the other important family involved with this cave is the Nolans. The Nolans' ancestors homesteaded the property originally, and Lauren Weaver and the Grills purchased it from them, essentially. And there's a whole story about that. And so they had done a lot of guano mining in the cave, and so down in that area where the mining had occurred, I named it the Nolan District. Next slide. And this is actually 3 of the 4 sisters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters of Susanna Buckelew, Susanna Noland, I should say, who was born in Pennsylvania to Amish folk, it seems. She was on a wagon train around 16 years old going west when one of the, either wagon master or one of the scouts by the name of Martin Noland fell in love with her. This is right out of the West romance. They ran away, got married, worked their way west doing, he would do scouting for the railroad and she would do laundry, had a kid, eventually homesteaded a property north near the Salt River. There's actually a creek there called Nolan Creek, named after that homestead. What happened is they had a fire. They had at this time 7 kids, and there was a fire in their cabin, and Martin Nolan ran into the house to make sure no kids were in it, and he got smoke inhalation, and he died 3 weeks later. So here you have Susanna Noland with 7 kids, all under 15, in the West. And as one of her ancestors wrote, she had 3 choices. She could become a prostitute, get married. That was basically the 2 choices. And so she chose getting married again. She found a man, Henry Buckelew, who said, there's a great piece of property farther south in Arizona that I'd like to go to. So they took everybody down to this piece of property, and they settled where Buckelew is now with her kids, who at that time ranged in 20 to 3. Actually, they had a baby, Audie, with Henry. And they settled there. And so these are Rhonda, Shelley, and Becky, 3 of the 4 daughters, great-granddaughters of Susanna Noland. Earl Noland, grandson of Susanna, had grown up in the property with her father, Frank, had never been in the cave. His father told him, don't go in, it's bad air. You don't go in. All I want you to do is clean out the guano in the entrance alcove. And that's all he ever saw of the cave. And he, in fact, was at first reluctant to have us go in. He wasn't the owner anymore, and he was reluctant to talk to me. But after some help from the Grills, they eventually agreed to talk. We went, and me and David went and had a day with them, spoke at great length. They were very excited. Earl never knew that they had been mining by his father and his uncles in the 20s and 30s of guano at the bottom of this cave. And so first time we met them, Rhonda says to me, very first words is, I want to go in the cave. So me and David Vodanek, on one day at the Grills, we trained them and Becky's husband, Mike, how to do vertical. And we took them in the cave the next day, and I got to see the most important thing, which there are many signatures from her ancestors, their ancestors, on this formation in the bottom of the cave, historic signatures. So they got to see those, and they were very thrilled about that. Next. We also took Lauren Weaver in the cave, did the same thing, me and David, with Adam Savinsky's help, so he could get to see what he owns. The Grills have since told me that he was very glad to do it, but he has absolutely no interest in going caving again. Interesting thing is that Rhonda, David and I saw them a week ago to give them a copy of the monograph, and the first words out of Rhonda's mouth again was, I want to go back. And I had thought after that trip she would want to kill me, because it was a tough trip for her. But they all did it, no problems, nothing of any significance, but they want to go back caving again, and we're talking about that. These people are enthusiastic about it and had a great time. Next, Paul, please. And so this is the cover of the monograph, and it's specifically, I took a picture of the signatures. That's Susanna Buckelew's signature from '04, and there's Henry Buckelew from the same thing, and that's Audie Buckelew, their daughter, who at that time was about 4 years old when this trip took place. You can also see Will Noland and Katie Noland. Will was the oldest son. Katie was the oldest child of Martin and Susanna Noland. At this time, when they signed this in '01, they were over 18. I don't remember the exact ages. Will was accidentally shot by his brother Frank. It's a tragedy. They slept in one of the 2 houses the family had built. Frank had gotten up to do chores. His brother was sleeping in, who was the older. And so he comes back to the house. He looks through the window, sees his brother sleeping. He says he's going to have some fun. He takes out his gun, and he decides he's going to shoot across the windows to wake his brother up. The tragedy is that Will sat up at the exact same moment he fired, and he killed him. And so I researched that to find out the story behind that. It's a tragedy. Frank Noland, who did this, was Earl's father, and I've heard from a number of people he was a really tough guy. And I could understand why. It's hard life, ranching life in those days. They were homesteaders, they were pioneers, and then they had these kind of tragedies to go with it. So anyway, that's here. I've got that for sale. This is the table of contents for it, just so you can see the similar approach I took for the crystal monograph and others. So we got the history. I've given you some of that history here today. Brian led with Nicole a geology of the cave, and then Phyllis Ferrangi did a really nice baseline biology study of the biology in the cave. This is a cave that the lesser long-nosed bat lives in. It's a roosting site for them. They follow the bloom of the agave north from Mexico, and so they come during the summer months to the cave, and there have been bat counts ranging from 2,500 to 4,000 lesser longnose in the cave. This is one of the ways that no one is allowed in the cave during the summer months at all. In fact, during our survey, I talked to bat specialists about when should we go in, when would be safe, and the Game and Fish, as well as the guy doing the bat survey at the time, said, if you don't go in from March to October, you'll be okay. So we had a trip in, he said from April to October. And we had a trip in March in which we saw bats. And we were in the entrance when we saw the bats, so we aborted the trip. And in an October trip later, as we were leaving the cave at the end of the day, we saw bats. So the access rules have been shrunk. If there are any trips to the cave, they are limited to the months of between November and March. You can't go in any time beyond that. The cave is closed. Once again, next slide, please. Where is the slide? Go back. It's not here. All right. Well, I had a picture of the grills reading the monograph after I presented them. They were really engrossed. The cave, once again, is not open, but they are open to trips, recreational trips, if people wish to do it on a periodic basis. I think, once again, it's just a matter of trust over time, realizing that they're not going to be inundated with many, many trips. You know, if people visit the cave maybe once every year, every 2 years, I think that'll get everybody in the caving community interested, getting to see the cave, and it won't be bothering them in any significant manner. So anyway, following that, Ben Tobin and I worked out a deal to do the Horseshoe Mesa. Next slide. In 1978, there was the Cave Research Foundation project at Horseshoe Mesa, in which it produced a lot of good data, including, this is the geology map from that survey, including 22 listed leads on the mesa itself, on the wall of the mesa as you go around, below the rim. Some of those had been done in the subsequent years, but not all, as far as we knew. And so Ben says, you want to do it? Plus, I'd like to get the maps redone to bring them up to today's standards. It's not that they were bad maps, it's just we have new standards, we'd like to have top and down there. So I said, okay, we'll do it. And so, next slide. Next slide. So we've had 4 survey weekends so far, basically from October to October 17 to October 18. Next slide. During that time, we surveyed 5 caves and inventoried them as well, new inventory sheets that Ben had worked out that would tie the inventory to the survey itself, so you knew where things were. Next. And we produced 3 maps, 2 maps, which cover 3 of the caves on the mesa. Next. Last year, I presented the Crystal Forest map. That was finished last year. Next. This year, we finished Babylon Cave, which also includes Middle Cave right here. It also includes a little, this is the entrance to Crystal Forest here, so they're very close to each other. It also includes a, right around, where is it? No, it's not on this map. Anyway, so this map's now finished as well. There are 2 other maps, surveys that are completed for Land's End and Scorpion, and Brian and Nicole are doing those maps soon, I hope. No pressure, but we'd like to get those done. We do have more work to do. And so those were the first 3 weekends were mostly focused on surveying, though each Sunday we would go out and try to cover some of the leads. And I will admit that doing this kind of work is very different than the surveying and exploration work I would do back east in West Virginia. So we didn't do it very efficiently the first weekend. The first weekend we just went to where we thought the leads were and tried to rappel into them, and that really didn't work very successfully. In fact, Dave Hamer was rappelling over a point we thought was above a lead. It turns out was not above the lead, and he didn't do the rappel because there's too many winds. We aborted it. But had he done the rappel, there wouldn't have been anything for him to see. So I said, the next weekend, let's come with binoculars and take advantage of Horseshoe Mesa. Be on one side, look across to the other. And we did that the next 2 weekends and had some success. Next slide, please. This is, oh, by the way, this is the entrance of Crystal Forest during that survey. Next slide. Next slide. So we had these numerous leads to check. Next slide. And so I took panorama picture of the wall from one side of the horseshoe to the other, and then marked it up. One of the things the 78 CRF project did not do is it did not outline what leads they actually had checked. So we were kind of running blind. We knew what leads existed based upon their data, and you can't see there, but some of these are numbered. And those are from the CRF survey. But then using this picture, I marked every spot, question marks, X's, where I thought there might be something. And so when we went back in October, this last trip in October, we started to do a systematic check of leads. And next slide, please. And so this is, for example, Jeff Watkins rappelling down with me at the top to various leads where they were. And on this particular weekend, we had Allison and Andrew Lowell on the opposite prong of the mesa with binoculars and radios guiding us to the right spot. So and they had the pictures that I just showed you to show them exactly where the leads were, so they could place us above those leads. And so this worked very well. We started to check out a lot of leads. Go back, please, 2 slides, Paul. Oh, this one. No, one. Go forward. I'm sorry, this one. So if you look closely, there's some of these are question marks, but some are now X's. And the X's are ones we checked. And we covered a lot, actually, including some of the leads from CRF. Over here, go ahead, go back to the next 2 slides to pull this one. And so, the back 1 slide. So anyway, so this is Jeff here. He's going down to 1 lead, and you get down, and we all came prepared to have to do changeovers on rope, but we never had to. We always hit a ledge where you'd be working. So Jeff would go down to the ledge where the leads were, and he'd walk around and he'd check them all out. Next slide. If you look closely right here, that's Carl Steuben, about 150 feet down. He's trying to work his way to this lead right here. This is an opening. And next slide. You can see his feet. He's in it now. He managed to swing himself over and get in. That particular entrance is only about 2 body lengths, filled with rat nest material that is probably of significant paleo interest to the paleontologists. Very deep. It might be a dig, but we don't want to dig it necessarily without getting the paleontologists involved, because there might be some really good data in that cave of the accumulated centuries, multi-centuries, thousands of years possibly of rat material, which would have maybe bones in it and a lot of other good material, actually. So that's one. We did not, on this particular, find any caves, but what we did do is we were able to cross off and document now a lot of the potential leads in the future, so people won't have to go back. Next. So this is the other prong. The previous one I showed you was the inside eastern prong, and this is the inside of the western prong, once again marked. The numbers indicate the CRF survey. We mostly focused on the eastern inside prong on this weekend, but we did do 1 survey to this one right here, which is still a question mark. Next slide. That's me rappelling down to it right there. And you see the little orange dot there. That'll give you an idea of how it was about we had a 200-foot rope, which did reach the ledge below, which is about here. Yeah, it might have been here, actually. It was here, which is about 30 feet. And so I rappelled down. I was about 15 feet away from the entrance and could look in and could see a flowstone floor, very smooth, and formations and blackness beyond. But I was, as I say, 15 feet away, and I did not wish to try pendulum, because when I looked up, I realized that the rock was coming up over a lip that I had not padded. I had not realized I was going over that lip, and I realized that was a rub spot that I did not want to put stress on. And so I rappelled down to the bottom, got off rope, changed over. I looked to see if there's any way to climb up. There is no way to climb up, unless you do bolting or technical climbing of much more than I can do. So we got back on rope, and then I climbed back up, being very careful until I passed that rub point. No damage to the rope, but I decided discretion is a better part of valor. Next time we come back, it would be not a problem. It would not be a problem to pad that as we come down. The rappel was pretty good. 5 minutes, that's a good thing. No problem, I'm almost done. Next. Next slide. Future weekends. Right after the October weekend, I called the Park Service. Ben Tobin doesn't work there anymore, and talked to the person who I'm supposed to deal with. And I've been trying to arrange a renewal of my science permit and schedule an April weekend. And for many reasons that I cannot explain, it was very difficult to get that finalized. And then the government shutdown happened, and I'm not able to talk to anybody right now. So I'm hoping to do an April trip, but I can't say for sure if that's going to happen. Granted, we could just go right now. The park's open, but I'd rather go through the Park Service and do it correctly. So that's where I stand with this project. Last slide, I think. Nope, this is the group that went in October. This was this was a really pleasant weekend for me, because I had with me on this trip Carl, I had never done vertical work with before, and Jeff Watkins, I had never done vertical work before, and I knew Mike. There were recommendations, and I spoke to these people, and I made sure their qualifications were good, but I don't know what, there's always a concern, and so I have to watch and make sure everything will be okay. This was the strongest vertical group I've ever had to work with. It was really great. They knew what they were doing, they knew how to rig, they knew how to do everything, and it was really efficient. We were able to get a lot done because of this group, and I thank them. Jeff Stevens, and this is Andrew Lowell, and Allison's taking the picture, and Dave Hamer, and Mike Van Note. So it was a really good group, and we had a great success, and they all want to come back. I hope we can do that. Next slide, last one, I think. So this is just generally the listserv is the main thing of the Western Maps is a listserv. Anyone who's on it can use it to set up a project. Mike Como has done that. He's got projects in the Chiricahua. David Owis has done that recently because he's learning how to sketch and become a cartographer, which is just wonderful. And when we get some schedules weekend, I want to go on both those projects and hope everyone else does. And anyone who's on that listserv, if you've got a project, use it. It's not my listserv. It's a listserv of surveyors and cavers who want to do projects. You put out a notice there, you're going to get help. And so I think that's it, and I'll have questions at this point. Next slide. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. So any questions? Yes.
Bob, this isn't really a question, but when you were mentioning the people on that trip with the Nolan descendants, you got a little tongue-tied mentioning Adam, and it was Adam Zipkin.
Zipkin, thank you. I did get tongue-tied.
His services were very valuable.
He took the pictures, and the cover picture you see there, as well as the picture of the three sisters, was taken by him. And without his help, we couldn't have done it because these were beginners. He was at the top of the drop when they were coming up. Yes.
So I didn't see a chapter on the bats.
Oh well, I'll explain why there isn't. To a certain extent, I'll explain why there. I can't really. We did not have a bat expert working with us, but Rick. I might have the name wrong from memory. Rick Snyder was doing research there. I think that's the name. It's in my. Sherwin, thank you. I knew I had it wrong. Rick Sherwin was doing research. I spoke to him before the project, and he was enthused. He was one of the people that gave me the advice about when not to go. And he said at the time that he would be glad to give us a chapter. So as the monograph was getting close to finish, I was emailing him, asking him if he would give us something. And I never heard back from him. He's hard to reach. He's working. He does his stuff. So that's why there's no issue on the bats.
But leptos don't deposit guano that be mined. So
All right, well, I can talk on that subject. I don't think the mining, there's lots of guano in there. I don't think the mining operation was tremendously successful, to put it very mildly. That's correct. And so,
that's a real failing on part of your monograph. If it is a bat cave, then it should have been addressed.
well, you're absolutely correct. I can't answer that. I tried. I can't. I'm not a bad expert, so I can't answer that. Rick Sherman offered, and then when the time came, he wasn't there. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. So now we have a